Hello and welcome to GDB World. In today's video we will have a look at how we can get started with making a simple stylized grass material in SubstanceDesigner. I thought I'd try a different method to what I would normally do to see what sort of results we could produce. If you enjoy the video and wish to support the channel, please like and subscribe. And without further delay, let's jump straight into the video. First of all, we're looking at the base shape for the grass patches. First we start with waveform 1, then blend in a gradient linear 1. This time we're using it to cut off half the shape. By doing that we can then mirror it to create like a black divide line in between the two. And that simulates the nice fold and seam of the grass itself. Next we're then blending in yet another grayscale gradient. And this time we're using it to sort of cut off one edge of the blade. And then we're warping that blade 4 times to make 4 different variations of grass. We can then put that into a splatter circular node to create a different patches that we'll use. You can make bigger ones, smaller ones, ones with more or less, depending on what you sort of want. But often I would probably tweak it once you put it into your tile sampler or tile generator, whatever you're planning to use for actually distributing the pattern. So in my case I'm using the tile sampler and I'm using the vector displacement map on the tile sampler, as well as using the mask random and then some of the luminosity random, just to make sure we get a bit of a layering effect on the pattern itself. Now we move on to the second shape, that's been the clover. The clover is nice and simple, just made up of a square and a bell. So what the bell's doing is it's just like a directional warp with the square, and that just bellows it out to give this sort of leafy sort of shape. And that allows us to tweak it further with another warp and just a more harsh square that gets sort of rounded off in the end. It allows us to control the warp as closely as we possibly can. Then we're just reusing the same technique we used for the grass blade, blending in a gradient, cutting it in half and mirroring it on itself. For that we move to the smaller veins on the leaf. Now this is created with a tile generator. You just set a number of vertical patterns for a square, rotate it so it's on an angle, and then you just mirror that, and that leaves us with a nice zoomed in leaf that can be blended over the top of the original pattern just as a multiplier. Use a levels node just to control and bring back the values, because obviously solid black could be a bit too strong for it, and then just apply your noise appropriately depending on exactly what kind of shapes you're going for. In my case I just sort of went for clouds and warped it with a slope blur. Now we're just bumping it to a non-uniform blur, using itself as the slope. This just sort of softens the edges and makes the leaf just more 3D, gives it more values to work with. Then we're using a directional warp with another gradient, and we just invert that gradient to give it more of a love heart sort of shape. After that's done, we can move on to the last sort of detail for the leaf. That's the sort of diamond shape that sits on top. You could do this just in the color map side of things, you don't have to do it in the height part, but it just seems to be easier to do everything all in the whole lot and then adjust the height appropriately. So the way this is done is just 2 squares, big square and a small, and then using the small square to subtract from the big square to hollow it out. We're then warping it with a directional noise to sort of roughen up the shape to get closer to our reference, and then yet another warp with a grunge map to really get close to what our reference is looking like. Then blur a little bit so then it's not so harsh, and then we can sort of subtract that shape from our original base shape. Finally, we're able to use a splitter circular node, and we just use this to direct all the leaves towards the center. And we're just going to have it as a 4-leaf clover, so we're going to set it to 4. And now that brings us to the flower. It's made up of pretty much exactly the same shape as we did for the clover leaf. So we're just going to copy half that graph down, increase the amount of leaves. Then we can move into the center part of the flower. When I was designing this one, I had in mind like a sunflower. It seemed to be the easiest sort of shape to go for. So the way I'm doing that is just using a bell. We're warping in a dirt 4. Using some levels to control the values a little bit. And then we come down here, we can see an inverted bell that's purely just used for the multi-directional warp. And then we're multi-directionally warping like a splatter circular of bells. Then we just blend that into the original shape as a copy with a mask created from the bell shape itself. And then we can just use a tile generator or tile sampler, whatever you want to use, to blend that in with the main shape. Other than that, that's about it for today's video. I'll leave you guys with a bit of a time lapse. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and have a lovely day.